to support innovation. Of course, we can achieve through inclusive governance, greater acceptance of decisions and the building of trust, including stakeholders with often conflicting interests is challenging, but at the same time, it can bridge the differences. And the integrated water resources management, in my view, requires in this inclusion of all stakeholders if it's really to be integrated. In this figure, you can basically see the various levels of stakeholder engagement. It is the so-called ladder of citizen participation, starting from the very bottom from the communication, one-way communication, and then consultation and participation, where feedback of stakeholders is given, but it does not necessarily, it's not necessarily used to shape decisions. And moving on to the top of the ladder, we have co-creation, co-decision, co-development of solutions by stakeholders. And I'm sure that in the 6 presentations of the 6 projects, we will have evidence on all these different processes. The OECD made an interesting survey on effective water governance, and the stakeholders replied on which are the most often applied mechanisms related to stakeholder engagement. And you can see here that we have the typical meetings, workshop, expert panels are very much used, but also web-based communication technologies. In the last years and following the digitalization era of water, innovative mechanisms for stakeholder engagement have arisen and are demonstrated through the European project, including serious game, decision support platforms, online monitoring tools used by stakeholders, and customized internet applications and others. And I'm sure that we will see some of these in the presentations to follow. In the same survey, I want to highlight that policy reform and the projects under discussion have been identified by the stakeholders as the most important drivers for engaging stakeholders. And to conclude, a couple of slides from previous projects. I have summarized some indicative projects which I believe have contributed towards stakeholder engagement in the water sector. Of course, there are several others, and this is just a selection. We have the Symphonexus Horizon project, which developed a serious game in order to support the understanding of stakeholders on the Nexus approach, but also on the implementation of policies. The Water FP7 project, which implemented a series of peer-to-peer meetings, coaching, training for stakeholders related to innovative procurement and how to integrate innovation in the procurement by municipalities and water utilities. The Horizon 2020 INCatch project on citizen science activities which have taken place in order to monitor the quality of rivers and lakes, and the actual citizens using the tools which were developed during the project in order to monitor water quality. And an older project, River, which has undertook stakeholder engagement activities and communication between scientists and stakeholders within the concept of integrated water resources management at the subcatchment level. Last slide is about today's presentation. As Andrea mentioned, we have 3 Horizon 2020 projects in the first session. These 3 projects were actually funded in the same call, Water in the Context of Circular Economy. And then we have 3 projects from the programs of Interreg Europe, Erasmus Plus, and Life Environment, all addressing the issues of including water governance. So, Andrea, that's all. I hope I was short enough.
Yes,
so that we can start
perfectly on time. And I leave you the floor along with Dimitris for the presentation from Redrusa project now.
Sure. Dimitris, do you want to share the presentation? So I will start with the first couple of slides on the Idrousa project, and then Dimitris Kokinakis, who is our dissemination and communication manager from Impact Hub Athens, will provide further details. Idrousa is an innovation action project within Horizon 2020. This means that we are implementing real solutions at full scale. It is a circular economy water project where we are developing, testing, and optimizing solutions to valorize non-conventional water sources. Our focus is in the Mediterranean water scarce areas where we apply decentralized solutions integrating gray with green infrastructure. So we integrate nature-based solutions as well as biomimicry solutions with more conventional engineered approaches to tackle water-related problems. And we do this through 6 demonstration sites, which have been developed and are currently running in 3 Greek islands, as well as through 25 transferability case studies in Europe, the Mediterranean, and beyond. In the figure on the right, you can see Idrousa water loops in a single figure. We valorize the non-conventional water sources such as seawater, rainwater, stormwater, wastewater, and through our solutions, we produce reclaimed water suitable for agricultural use, domestic non-potable use. We produce energy, we recycle nutrients through fertigation, and produce high added value crops. So within Idrousa, we have been working with stakeholders from the very beginning of the project. I would say even before the project was funded, during the proposal application stage, we have co-developed our solutions together with local stakeholders, which are often the end users, these include small ecotourist businesses, water utilities, municipalities, farmers, and entrepreneurs. We have analyzed together with our stakeholders the EU policy related to Idrousa water loops very concisely in order to identify barriers and opportunities. And as an example of our continuous process towards inclusive governance, I will highlight our integrated full-scale system for wastewater treatment, resource recovery, and water reuse in Lesbos Island, which serves the village. The permit application for the innovative treatment technology was developed and submitted by the water utility following a consultation process we technology providers had with them to convince to adopt innovative technological solutions such as anaerobic processes combined with constructed wetlands, as these solutions had not been implemented before by the water utility. We discussed with them how to tackle with the Greek water reuse legislation, which is quite strict related to reclaimed water use. And I would say that although the system has been developed and is running, the process of engaging with the water utility is continuous even now. We have regular meetings during to discuss progress and provide scientific feedback. So we can move on now with Dimitris.
Greetings to everyone. Also from my side, thank you for being present and for sharing the knowledge of this stage of inclusive governance. I will share with you some topics and some approaches that we have followed, that they are innovative in terms of how everyone is getting on the same page and how we conceive and we convene the different stakeholders in one community. So starting for Idrousa, as Simo said, like we are developing nature-based solutions and decentralized solutions in remote places, let's say, in 6 demo sites. So our goal was to build an active community around these circular nature-based solutions for water treatment. It was very important to understand that the approach was community-based, that everyone is invited in order to join these solutions in order to have progress in the challenge that we collectively face. So the 3 objectives that we had was to inform and raise awareness. So it's the first stage, so people to sympathize and to empathize with the topic, understand the challenge that they face. The second part was to activate and engage local but also international ambassadors for the Idrousa mission. And the third objective was to ensure the adaptation and the replication of Hydrousa on larger scale. So we work in 3 levels. Like the one is to raise awareness. The second one is to provide opportunities for people to actively be part of the solutions, understand the solutions, feel loyal about the solutions, and on the later stage also advocate and ask for the solutions. And the third objective was like to ensure that these solutions are working on the local base, that we manage to model them and to scale them up in more locations in Europe, but also in the globe. So sharing a little bit the methodology, one of our first elements was to actively map all the stakeholders who are affecting and also being affected from our solutions. And also to see who are the people, who are the stakeholders who join this challenge to tackle water stress in these regions. So as you see on the graph, we have a multi-stakeholder approach, and we try to include everyone in our activities. Like on the second stage also, what we did was based on design thinking, we empathize with our users and stakeholders, understanding the pains and the gains of each group. So we design like specific activities that they are tackling a certain topic and is also addressing a certain objective, like from awareness, participation, and also co-decision or co-development. Our process is based on 6 steps. It's also circular. So what we do is that we identify like the key messages and the tone of voice. So what we are doing with Hydrousa is not the same message, and this is also important. It's not the same message that we address to all the stakeholders. We need to have a clear core, but the key messages and the tone of voice is adapted every time to the communities that we engage. We identify specific target groups, like social groups that we want to activate, educate, and engage in our solutions. We implement the activities, we engage the different stakeholders, and of course, we evaluate our efforts, and we assess the process in order to see if our objectives and our goals are met. Also is important, as I saw here, like our motto is a community of water allies. So we bring together all the different stakeholders from local to national to European and to global level. I will share with you now some of the results of the co-creation activities that we have realized. So here you can see the activities that we did in Mykonos Island. Not only in Mykonos Island, actually these are the numbers of all our co-creation activities. We have more than 230 stakeholders participating, 6 activities that they include Proaction Cafe, co-creation workshops, walking tours and open days, and 3 locations with the objective to move from communication to participation and representation. Going now on the results, here we can see, as Simo said, like the activities in Antissa in Lesbos, where we work there with the municipality and the water utility unit in order to apply a water treatment system and to irrigate a plot that is next to this unit with an agroforestry unit. So what we did there was that we invited all the different stakeholders and we harvest the knowledge regarding traditional and new ways of fencing, crops, and irrigation. And these decisions that were afterwards were implemented within the field. So 70% of the citizen suggestions, they are currently applied in the field, and an ethnobotanical study was conducted and based on these local inputs. What we do is there also that we invite in the municipality and the schools to see the progress, to track the biodiversity of the plot, and then to see how this evolves through the nature-based solutions that we apply. Here we can see like the results in a small ecotouristic unit in Tinos. As you know, tourism is one of the most massive industries and contributors to economy in Greece. So we want to see how tourism can also contribute to a more circular and green agenda. So what we did there was that we have treated water from the units and water harvested, and we apply it to a small field, and they have green production that then is based on community CSA, community supported agriculture, and we have vegetable boxes that they now being available in restaurants and in households in the island. So people are actively involved and they see the end product and what we create that is used for the autonomy of water, food, and energy. Moving further, here we can see like the Mykonos Island that you also most probably know. This is a very popular island that is facing a lot of massive difficulties in terms of water resources. What we did there was that we had personal interviews and meetups with different stakeholders and citizens in order to see what is interesting to evaluate with our IT solutions. We apply their rainwater and stormwater harvesting, but also groundwater management. And what we see is that we are tuning our IT systems in order to be more relevant to the actual needs of the local people. This is also some activities that we do in order to ensure like a cross-border collaboration. These are summer schools that they are applied in each island. Info stands that they are also based on the idea of reuse and circularity that is going to be run by citizens in each island. A hackathon event that is like a 72 hours continuous workshop together with product designers, researchers, water utilities, and creatives in order to develop and to co-develop the solutions that they are inspired by Intrusa principles. And also we are organizing artistic residencies. This is also something that is something unique that we don't necessarily find commonly, is where we mix the researchers together with the artistic community to create more legit artworks in the island that they are related to water. On the challenges, I wouldn't stay a lot, so I can move more to the lessons learned. I think that one of the main challenges is the multiple authorities that they participate in these decisions in terms of policy making and in terms of alternative solutions provided. The difference in organizational culture and the resistance to change. And the misalignment of objectives many times from stakeholders in order to get on the same page. So some of the lessons learned for us is that, as Simo said, we need to include the local entities since the beginning in the design of the program. So this is the actual participation. Make sure that we have representation from all the various stakeholders. We have cross-sectoral action, so we don't marginalize in one specific stakeholders group, but we make sure that we have formats that they can blend the different interests, knowledge, and intentions. We manage and we try to increase the scientific capacity of our communities and increase, as we say, the public understanding of science. This is also very important. And last but not least, we evaluate and we have agile methods in order to maximize the relevance and the positive impact of our projects. Closing, so I can stay on time. Inclusive water governance is about actively engaging all. So our goal is to leave no one behind, as we have heard also from the EU. We are trying actively to get everyone on the same page on the urgency to act and participate, both from bottom-up and top-down approaches. So the future of our communities cannot be separated from the future of Earth, and the time to act is now. Thank you, everyone. Here you can follow us.
Thank you very much, Dimitris and Simos, for this excellent presentation. Now the time has come, to reveal about the next gen project that is, a circular economy, water-related project can provide us in terms of stakeholder engagement and public acceptance about circular water solutions. So I welcome Jos Frinsel, KWR, and I invite him to take the floor.
Yes, thanks, Andrea. Good afternoon, everyone. So let me share my screen. So, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to present the work of NextGen on stakeholder engagement and public acceptance for circular water solutions. NextGen is an Horizon 2020 project about circular water solutions, and we not only demonstrate new technologies, but also innovative business models and governance arrangements. And we do that at 10 large-scale demo cases across Europe. And our project is very much about developing the approaches and partnerships for further upscaling and transferring circular water solutions. So within these demo cases, obviously, central is technologies to reuse water, to produce energy, to recover nutrients. So we not only demonstrate these technologies, but we also assess their performance. For example, the sustainability performance at the system level. On the top left of the figure, you can see that we obviously also look at the economic aspects. It's a circular economy project. So we need to explore new business models. And we also need to understand how we can better connect to other sectors in the economy, such as agriculture or housing. And on the right side, you see the importance of engagement of citizens and stakeholders, and also the importance of addressing social and governance challenges. And that is the part of the presentation in this meeting I will focus on. So if we look at stakeholder engagement and public acceptance, for water and the circular economy, it's important to redesign the whole water system. This requires first, an active involvement and engagement and collaboration of all stakeholders across the whole water value chain. And secondly, we need to build societal acceptance and adaptive governance with supportive regulations. So in this presentation, I will present what we are doing within NextGen related to communities of practice, augmented reality, serious gaming, public acceptance, and an enabling governance framework. So let's start with communities of practice. So at all our 10 demo cases, we have set up these communities of practice with local stakeholders consisting of technology providers and local governance professionals, scientists, and demo case stakeholders. And COPs are a good way to discuss the circular water solutions in its institutional context with these relevant stakeholders from the start of the project. So not a kind of information campaign at the end, but co-creating these innovations together with the relevant stakeholders. So we prepared a kind of roadmap for these demo cases. First, a COP where you set the scene, you together with the stakeholders, you set a future vision to work towards to, you identify options for further closing the loop, not only for water, but also for energy and materials. In this third round, we look at the assessment. Are we really being more efficient, and what are the societal and governance challenges to overcome? And in the final round, we look at ways for further upscaling and evaluation. So indeed, these COPs are effective if we manage to obtain social learning. Social learning so that stakeholders are actually engaged and interacted, that there's scope for change in everyone's issue frames, and that each role and competence are aware. So we have developed a new evaluation framework for these COPs. And based on that, we identified 6 key success factors to enhance social learning as an effective way to have these communities of practice organized. For example, a key success factor related to the convergence on a shared perspective. So these COPs are very much focused on the stakeholder groups involved. but dedicated to the citizens and general public, we obviously have public outreach activities and community engagement activities, a bit similar as Hidrosa just presented. But we also have developed two other really nice tools. First is an augmented reality app, and secondly, a serious game. So on the left, you see the augmented reality app of a sewer mining demonstration project at Urban Tree Nursery in Athens. And through this augmented reality app, we can make the solutions visible to the visitors. So you go there with your smartphone, you find a QR code at this black box of the technology, the sewer mining model. You are connected to the RR app, you get information on what's going on. You can click on a video for further information and explanation. You can participate in a quiz and answer a simple survey, which proves to be a good way for citizen engagement, in particular of young people. On the right side, you see a serious game we are developing, which is similar to the Symphonexus series game, already mentioned by Simons in his introduction. So this provides an opportunity for citizens to get insight into the options and motivations of all stakeholders. But it's not only of interest to citizens, but also to policymakers, because you can select different circular options and see the impact it has on the water quality, the energy consumption, the water self-sufficiency, the nutrients recovery, etc. So we just have finalized this series game for a virtual town, and we are now converting this to demo case specifics, for example, in Costa Brava. Okay, so next, moving on to public acceptance. So we try to develop a public engagement strategy, and then it's very important that we have a better understanding of the acceptance and the conditions that determine this acceptance. Here you can see an example of a large survey we did in the UK and Netherlands. We also did this in Spain. And we asked whether citizens would support using recycled water for drinking purposes. And we find from this survey a rather high support, like 70%. And maybe more important, there's only a very small percentage which really doesn't want to drink water prepared from recycled water. We also asked this question if people would support eating food produced from products that use nutrients recovered from sewage. And that support was even a bit higher. So in general, the public is willing to accept circular water solutions and reuse. And an important factor that determines this acceptance is a good understanding of the benefits and the needs, and also an understanding of the de facto water reuse we already have. And a second important element defining this is trust. Trust not only in the reclaimed water itself, but also trust in the institutions involved that control and monitor this reuse initiatives. So the government agencies involved. So if there's large trust in the ministries and local authorities, then acceptance of reuse is higher. And that's an important finding to include in our next step of the project, where we try to develop an enabling governance framework. So we had a very nice Water Projects Europe sessions last March to discuss this. So I can't go too much in detail, but what we are doing is we identify which regulations currently enable or hinder the transition to circular water economy. Of course, the recent new Circular Economy Action Plan of the European Commission is very supportive and enabling, but current or maybe with somewhat older regulations, like for example, the Sewage Sludge Directive, we sometimes see as hindering, for example, hindering in that recovered products from sewage require an end of waste status, which is a long process which has to be done for each individual product again and again, and also for each country in Europe. And that is an important hindering factor in upscaling our circular solutions. Now, to finalize, we try to integrate all these elements in a roadmap for further transition of water in the circular economy. So the lessons learned related to engagement and COPs and the experience we have with the public using serious games and augmented reality, but also the adapted governance needed and our recommendations related to supportive regulations will be included into this roadmap next to other important elements like having indeed innovative and sustainable technologies at system level, having indeed suitable business arrangements and viable economy. And let's not forget also how to better connect to other sectors. So this is work we are developing right now at this moment, and we hope to get this finalized within 1 year. So that takes me to the conclusion of my presentation. So I'm really happy that we have this session on inclusive governance, because this is indeed essential for further upscaling. So at least what we need is stakeholder collaboration in devising these innovations in its institutional context, kind of co-creation process. We need to build public acceptance through societal legitimation. So let's build positive narratives of the benefits of, for example, water reuse, and also relate this to the de facto reuse we already have. And finally, we need a regulatory framework that supports the exploitation of the value of water and its embedded resources. So not only looking at securing the safety and water quality, but also supporting the exploitation of the value of water. And my final discussion statement, as we all know, currently the member states are working on the implementation of the new water reuse regulation. And to me, I think this provides an opportunity that authorities should promote a dialogue with the stakeholders and the public related to this. And the discussion maybe also, my question is, maybe the authority should require that this dialogue is part of a risk communication plan, maybe even have an obligation of the risk management plan that is part of the new water reuse regulation. So I'm happy to hear your feedback on my discussion statement. That was my presentation. Thanks, André and Samus.
Thanks, yes. Thanks, crystal clear, and also in the final statement, and which is, the question mark then, and a point for discussion for all of us. Now the time has come for the project O, and I'm happy to ask Alexander Gerber from Rheinval University to present the attitude and expectation assessment from Project O. Thank you very much for being with us, Alexander.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction, and it was super exciting already to hear about the other projects. I can't wait actually to see the slide decks, and therefore also my thanks to the REA, because something like that, like a cross-project collaborative platform and event, I think this is what we really need much more for cross-project learning. So thanks again for that. Thanks for allowing us to share a few ideas today. I'm not the coordinator of Project O. I only lead the work package, which is responsible for the stakeholder assessment and engagement. So let me maybe quickly share my screen. Second. Here we go. So you should be seeing Project O now in front of you, if that's correct.
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you. And maybe picking up from what's been said so far, a couple of, just 3 or 4 points, because not only that when I looked at the Greek slides, that I got immediately into holiday mood when I saw the islands, but it was more like I saw, for example, on one slide that this OECD quote about effectiveness of stakeholder engagement still something that needs to be measured properly. So I think we should, if we have time, try to discuss a bit about the methodological challenges in doing that. We had stakeholder mapping and other more systematic forms of assessment mentioned earlier. I think it was a Greek colleague, and that's still being very rare. For example, the mapping approach. I think what I already identified is that the analysis of stakeholders and their engagement are two very different pairs of shoes, which we probably also need to distinguish properly. And then I read about communities of allies, which obviously is something that we all strive for. We already have experience in our project, and I'm going to talk about that in the next few minutes, that it's not necessarily just allies that we need to be concerned about, but there are also significant, even systemic resistances and caveats when it comes to the implementation of those technologies and the quite fundamental changes that we are suggesting to the models and the systems of using and reusing water. So what I'm going to try to do is to connect the project profile to maybe also some theory and methodology. That would be my aspiration for the next probably remaining 7 minutes. Project O, if you pronounce it in a French way, you come up with water, O, obviously. It's coordinated by our Italian colleagues, a company called Iris. And the rest, I suppose, is pretty clear. It aims to show how local targeted water treatment technology can help improve global water management. We do that in 4 different demo sites in Israel, Spain, Italy, and Croatia. We intend to increase the opportunity to reuse water, to improve the quality of the water returned to the natural environment. It's a highly sophisticated engineering project, so we all had to learn, even us as social scientists, had to learn a lot about reverse osmosis and advanced oxidation and these technologies, which is for us was super interesting. We aim at using less operating energy when treating wastewater, and what I want to focus on here for our work package is that this project is built around the idea that it needs a social license to operate for the project to be a success for different reasons. The project be a success in terms of reporting to the European Commission that we have spent that money well, but also in terms of, does that scale up? Is that something that we could technically do in basically every municipality across the European continent? Is that something that has a legacy beyond the project timeline? So these 3 things, the success of the project, its scalability beyond the project, and the legacy beyond the timeline, is something that all requires what also my Dutch colleague just now emphasized, that we need this as a basic requirement, this inclusive governance, and for the institutions who want to make that change to have a social license to operate. Just a very brief excursion into the theory. We are probably aware of different models of SLO. So going from withdrawal in the market to acceptance, approval, and identification with the technology and with the change, because we essentially are talking about social change processes here. Then that there is the legal license, that there's a policy environment and a framework and something that actually can be implemented by the providers, for example, the local municipalities and so on. But that this obviously also comes with a social license if the people don't like the idea, if they don't. And that was what was really nicely displayed by the comparative analysis, the surveys that you've done in the Netherlands and in Spain, I think it was. So that was really interesting to see how that social acceptability varied very much depending on what you're asking, in which country and context. So I think there's also a lot to learn about that. And since we're all doing that in one way or another in the projects, I think it might be really interesting to actually compare that between the projects. The social license is normally considered necessary to generate a policymaker support for the financial and the regulatory incentives that are required to overcome those entrenched interests that have been there for a long time, certain communities that just hold a position which is often very valid. If it's the tourism industry and they don't want certain things to be discharged onto the beach or close to the beach, then we must accept that they have a very valid point and an economic interest and even possibly a cultural interest in that regard. Or we even encountered religious contexts, for example, in in wells that could potentially fall dry in Israel. And so it's a highly complex socio-cultural and socio-political issue that we're dealing with, and by far not a technical issue, which it is often portrayed when you look into the statutory regulation also on a European level. So this path dependency that is often very technologically determinist is something that I think needs to be overcome, and that is something that requires that degree of interdisciplinarity that all of our projects, or speaking for us, at least Project O, is trying to live. So we have 2 work packages, work package 3 and 8. I coordinate number 8. Never mind the numbers, but this is basically about stakeholder engagement and the whole political communication and policy analysis. This is where we deal with the inclusive governance, and we've just added a couple of bullet points on their thoughts that we wanted to contribute from our project's perspective. It's a lot about transparency and accountability, which I think also is something that came through from the other presentations. It is important, if we talk about inclusion, that we actively try to avoid exclusion in the governance of new sources of water when it comes to certain communities, which is something that actually very easily happens, particularly if you don't like the attitude or the standing or the opinion of one group. Then you kind of tend to, okay, can we ignore them? Is the risk small enough to do that? That's obviously not an inclusive approach, which is, however, something that is politically often quite opportune. Generating more inclusive rules for the equitability, and that particularly when it comes to sharing the risks instead of putting them, for example, just on the industry or on the citizens. Let's say if certain water is to be sprayed in the park, we had that discussion, and that's a park where small toddlers and children crawl across the lawn, and suddenly you have entirely different hygiene issues literally at your hands compared to just, for example, just spraying it on the fields or using it for the olive orchard. Increasing the variety of stakeholders participating in the governance of water, generating trust by enhancing transparency and monitoring systems. That's also something I think that leads towards the legacy and the long-term perspectives of how these systems can be changed and need to be changed, and the enhancement of the adaptivity of the regulatory systems. So we can't just change or build something now, but we have to build systems that also are adaptive to future change. When mapping out the water flows, I saw that the different projects use different visualizations, but they're basically very comparable. So this is how we do it. You see the farmers and the territory and the river basin and so on here mapped out. The stakeholder environments are usually very challenging to manage. I already saw a first question in the chat. How do you actually identify them? I suppose we would all say it's a lot of desk usage, first of all, and then very systematically to make sure that we don't forget anyone. I struggled a bit when I used that template of the slide, if I may say so, and I saw involvement and participation, and I was tempted to say, shouldn't we just be talking about engagement? And that for particular reason, because language matters and concepts matter. If we want to engage, and this on the right-hand side is how we approach the stakeholder analysis and engagement process, is that the attitude assessment and the expectation assessment needs to be particularly systematic. Like do this as data intensive and as evidence-based as possible to address those stakeholders specifically. So not to produce dissemination material, which is there for everyone, but that there's specific communication channels to the policymakers and even their local, regional, national, transnational, and so on. To act locally, to act nationally and transnationally. So it's not just the analysis, but also the actions that need to be scaled on all of those different levels. To establish a social license to operate by means of actually engaging with these communities, and then creating, that's at least the dream for the end of the project, a living network and a community of practice that survives the end of that. In the end, what we come up with are these matrices down there. For example, here for the 4 regions that I mentioned, you have for Croatia that you have the different stakeholders, which are then mapped into whether those just need to be monitored in terms of let's keep up to date what the Ministry of the Environment and the Energy is doing. But there are also other stakeholders where we want to manage them very closely because they would have, for example, a particularly or comparatively large impact on the project if they were to go in the right or the wrong direction. So those demo cases on the implications of inclusive governance processes, as they are mentioned in the OECD paper, which I think was the motivation for today's event, I took the liberty to compare that to the European Environmental Agency case studies report from 2014, which I suppose was published before that, so it's not necessarily chronological. But if we look at that, I took out 6 bullet points here from that report, and I think they are totally in line of what all those projects are trying to do in the year 2021. That's what they already had written down about, what is it now, 7 years ago, that we need to include early in the process, upstream, that we need to clarify about what participation for these stakeholders to be engaged actually means, that we need to distinguish between different kinds of publics, and that the transparency in whatever decision in the end is being made is particularly important, because otherwise things are tokenistic, that we need to establish consensus through facilitation and mediation, and in the end, of course, map them out. So those, and I'm almost finished, those demo cases on the what do we have here? Most public engagement activities to be conducted on the ground, and I saw exciting co-creation activities and even artist in residence programs with our sibling projects. Most of those activities on the ground were planned for the final year, or for the final 1.5 years of our project anyway, so we have not done a tremendous amount of those yet, or some of them have even been postponed a bit further due to the corona pandemic, because we decided that it's not particularly effective to do them online. Everything's possible, but not everything is effective. We furthermore had and have still quite a few structural changes in this work package. So we require an amendment to the grant agreement, which has been pending for a couple of months now. So we're also waiting for that to bring actually an entirely new beneficiary on board, which is always challenging, as you know, almost 3 years into the project. That's the Institute for Methods Innovation down there, which is then supposed to implement those stakeholder engagement strategies that we've been preparing now for quite some time. This includes the formal inclusion of IMI in the consortium. If you want to look up the organization, then that's where it is. It's more an internal fact, but a very important one for us, of course, because of the process. As my discussion statement, and I hope I'm still reasonably in time, what I try to get across is that there are actually major barriers when it comes to a wider spread of closing the water loops and reuse. And those barriers have been explained a lot of times in many publications. So if we want to speak about social innovation, then we need to get from the technology focus of what are the barriers, why do people not accept the fact that this technology is so super cool, to a more interdisciplinary approach where we bring social science, economic sciences, natural and engineering sciences together in terms of, and that's again here from a publication, that's Dominguez and colleagues in 2018 in Science of the Total Environment, saying that the limited awareness of potential benefits among the stakeholders and the general public, and the lack of a supportive and a coherent framework for water use is exactly what's considered as those major barriers. So my discussion statement or question would be, if that's how the situation is, how do we imagine to come from the technology-focused project perspective to a more social innovation scalability of, do we really want to have systemic change on that across the European continent? And if so, what can we contribute as projects to do that? I think that's it. Thank you very much for listening. I hope I wasn't too long.
Thank you very much, Alexander. Thanks a lot. We had not a bit, but I mean, somehow I'm behind the schedule, and now I mean we have the time for the question and answer. Simon, please, I mean, if you want me to.
Yes, thanks, Andrea. I think we could start.
We cannot hear you well.
Better now?
No, it's very low.
Without the microphone?
No, it's okay.
It's okay. Okay. So I think we could start from Alexander's first question. How are the stakeholders identified were they including the relevant economic actors and the problem owners? Dimitri, would you like to take first on this one?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the presentations. It's very inspiring to see that the topic of the social agenda and extending the economic benefits to the environmental benefits and to the social benefits is actually being an important point into the European agenda at the moment. Like for us, mapping the stakeholders had to do with this exercise and this scheme that I showed. So it's a mapping that you identify certain sectors and then you go until specific individuals. So each individual could be a decision maker within the municipality, could be a farmer who has a big participation and a loud voice within the community. So you find like the tendencies and the local politics, let's say, till in public sector or into the governance to see who are the people who are relevant at the point to hear the story, to hear about a different way of water treatment and water preservation in its area. So for us, it was very important to come through recommendation. We built a very big database that we are using constantly. And as I show also in other presentations, to show them the progress of the results. I think a big difference what we see today is that we moved from the FP7 programs into research and innovation. So we have applications of the research locally. And now is the time that we need to see how these innovations, they are not finishing with the end of each project, but how they are being replicated and are sustainable as investments for the future of our communities. So this starts only with the individuals. So we need to have loyal stakeholders that they stay with the project, they understand the projects, and they see the benefits that they go beyond the individual, also for the community and the planet.
I think thank you, Dimitri. I think it's a good question to also address to Jos and Alexander, because it's a hot issue.
May I answer a good question, Alexander Vacher? Thanks for that. So indeed, if we start these projects, we always start with the usual suspects, our colleagues in the water sector. So that's why we had in the first COP meeting a discussion which stakeholders are actually lacking. And those are, of course, the stakeholders of the other sectors, like the energy sector and agriculture sector. And it's important to better understand what their needs are, not only what we can offer, so we can recover phosphate from wastewater, yes, but agriculture has specific needs for specifics of this phosphate. So better to include them from the start. So that's what we try to do in these COPs, to challenge our colleagues to go beyond the usual suspects within the water sector itself. Thanks.
Thank you, Jos. Alexander, would you like to comment?
Sure, I tried to make it a bit shorter this time. But I think that's exactly the point. We find ourselves in a bubble, don't we? I mean, this community, these events, these projects, which is natural, and it's something that happens in almost every project, I suppose. So how do we get out of the bubble and beyond the bubble? We can only burst the bubble from the inside, not from the outside. So we have to do that ourselves, basically. Yeah, we can do desk research, we can do surveys and so on, but in the end, you need people on the ground who know who that member of the committee in that municipality is, who has that casting vote or that influence on that decision, so to speak. Yeah, I'm not sure how the other projects are structured really, but we have local partners as core project beneficiaries. So they are funded project beneficiaries. Actually, the core ones are the institutions running the show in Omiš in Croatia or in Eilat in Israel. Because what am I supposed to do in terms of surveying people in Hebrew or in Croatian somewhere? I've been to the places, I've looked at it as a tourist basically, but I think a key is really to involve partners on the ground in the place who have been there for the last 100 years and who know what they're talking about. to also validate the approaches that otherwise might be very academic and abstract when they are coordinated centrally from such a project. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Andrea, very fast. Could we
think
1 minute to address a couple of questions? Or...
Sure. I mean, but I think that we can skip the break. I mean, I don't think that will be a big effort. So
okay.
We can gain, I mean, a few minutes for that.
So on the question for Idrousa, do you use special chemicals to treat water? I can take that, small technical. Regarding the case study that show, we don't use any chemical process. We have the disinfection process is a UV process, but other demo sites, we have ozonation, for example, where we use ozone for disinfection. There is an interesting question for Jos, I think, because why should we use reused water as drinking water when agriculture need is so much more?
Yeah, I think both is needed, of course. Well, I showed the result of the extreme, asking the acceptance of the general public for the extreme, drinking water made from wastewater, to get better understanding. Obviously, it's not saying that that is the best strategy, yeah, to have wastewater as a source of drinking water. And it's better to first look at options for wastewater as a source for agriculture. I fully agree.
Yes, so I think we all agree that agricultural activities is a main consumer of water, and if we can reuse in agriculture is one of the best options.
Yes.
Another question for you, Jos.
Yes. Regarding how do we include stakeholders in the marketplace?
Marketplace, exactly.
Well, it's a question from a colleague of NTUA, I see. And NTUA is developing this online marketplace together with Water Europe. It was presented also in last Water Projects Europe event. And the idea is indeed to have all stakeholders, so not only the providers, but also the customers, the users of these products in this online marketplace. So to bring them together. Because, yeah, that again, that's one of the main challenges. It's not only about what we can recover, but it's finding a market for our products. And for that, this online marketplace facilitates the interaction between providers and customers to discuss the specifics.
Thank you, Jos. Andrea, I think we can conclude on the session. I think we have addressed almost all questions.
Yes, I think so. I think that we can go ahead, I mean, with the next presentation now, and then we can harvest, I mean, the next questions, I mean, after the presentations. So now, I mean, I welcome, I mean, Kasia Piskorek from TU Delft, and present the WAVE project, which is an Interreg Europe funded project, and you're welcome to take the floor. And thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm really impressed with all the presentations that we've seen so far. They're very, very interesting, and for sure we will be further investigating on some concepts presented. Now, I would like to present the project Interreg WAVE, which is slightly different than those Horizon projects. Well, they're smaller and we don't have demonstration cases, but we based rather on good practices and action plans, so implementations. Okay. I have some difficulties with sharing because it doesn't it does recognize my presentation. Good.
It's visible now. Thank you.
Yep. Can you see the presentation?
Sure.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yes.
Perfect. Unfortunately, my colleague Marcin Dąbrowski, who was initially supposed to present our project, was not available today. It was an emergency, so I stepped in. But I'm also I'm also involved in the project. So I hope I will be able to provide with some insights. So WAVE stands for Water-Linked Heritage Valorization by developing an ecosystemic approach. That was very important for us because one of the core objectives of the project was to involve different stakeholders. So to take a look at the water from different perspectives, not only as a natural feature, but also from the economical point of view, from cultural point of view. And having that in mind, we were building and designing the stakeholder engagement process, governance and planning, and also methods for heritage valorizations. WAVE is not such a big project, but we have a very different partners. Some of them are municipalities, just sites in the cities, and some of them are whole regions. So this was our initial challenge, not only for defining our case studies areas, but also to define the methods we're going to be operating with. To relate the WAVE approach to OECD's inclusive governance concept, it might be said that it's rather focused on the process rather than outcome. However, it's definitely in our interest to build a sustainable stakeholders involvement and sustainable governance approach that will also translate into outcomes. What we are what the project is very much based on is the co-creation concept. Co-creation understood as a mutual value creation through specific interactions to focus on creating partnerships in public service delivery with citizens, as well as relations of joint responsibility. So based on this theoretical background, we were trying to design specifically for WAVE this stakeholders engagement process that was built on co-exploring, co-creating, and co-deciding. What was very important in the whole process was the identification of the stakeholders. That was a big part at the beginning of our project with the whole new methodology behind it, that each partner was trying to define all the stakeholders that can appear in specifics in relation to a specific site. What's important, we were thinking on those stakeholders in different categories. So we were trying to identify the stakeholders that are already there, but also future stakeholders. We were trying to analyze what type of stakeholders they are, whether they are very much engaged already or rather sleeping. Do they have a lot of power in their hands already, or they need to be literally empowered in the process? So having that in mind, we were defining the stakeholders network and the composition for each partner, and in relation to that, we were then trying to design involvement methods. So as it was already mentioned in some previous presentations, so going beyond the usual suspects. So like I already mentioned, the engagement of stakeholders was understood in a broader context. So not only those who are present at the moment, and not only those who are very much empowered at the moment, but we were trying to create as much inclusive environment for the local stakeholder groups through and get them involved in interactive dialogue. So what was used to do it within a WAVE project, and what was helpful and helping us to go through all those different cases, different circumstances, different environments, was storytelling around water-linked heritage. It was supposed to facilitate a placemaking as well as narratives that can attract attention and build shared values and identities. So another thing was a strategic approach to water as a vector. So that was a change, that was a connector of spaces, social groups, policy agendas, regional identities. And this is where you can find this ecosystemic approach translated into practice. Like I mentioned already several times during the presentation, different traditions and different practices of stakeholder engagement, as well as different domestic contexts, were challenging for us. Nevertheless, animating the engagement process and integration was very much organized through the methodology we were trying to introduce, and that we had to really also adjust due to pandemic. That was also there was another level of challenge, as we initially planned the project to be very much interactive, and we were putting a lot of hope in those direct interactions. So we had to, of course, limit this because of the COVID. Now, like I said, we don't have in the Interact projects, there are no demonstration cases, but in a very center of this knowledge and practice exchange process are good practices. So each partner was defining one or two good practices to be later shared with other partners. And of course, it's not possible to use and translate those practices directly, but then some elements can be adapted. So one of the good practices was Aquaphone Festival from Istergranum. That's a cross-border region, which makes it even more interesting because we have two countries, two different systems. However, the region is very strong with a very strong identity. And now, because of the water and because of the water-related features and heritage, it's very much being like integrated again. So this Aquaphone Festival is organized around the bridge that was rebuilt after the fall of communist regimes, and that's connecting two shores of the banks of the river, one on the Slovak and one on the Hungarian case, and it's very much. It's multilingual and co-organized by cultural NGOs, but the bridge is has also a very metaphoric dimension because it's a bridge for literature, art and culture between the nations that have been isolated from each other. Another example could be Reduce and their redevelopment in dialogue in Breda. These are features from the formal fortifications, and what's happening now? There was a scheme to check whether they're working properly some centuries ago. And now this procedure is actually being translated into this community engagement process. In Breda, the vectoral approach has been designed, and these were the ones that were actually bringing this vector approach to the project, and also emphasize that how important is building trust between the stakeholders, and how this can be used to provide with more flexibility. I will maybe just briefly go now through the lessons learned and go to my conclusions due to lack of time. So main lessons from the WAVE project so far is that water and water-linked heritage is the potential glue for integrating different policy agendas in a given territory. Approaches to water-linked heritage and its governance vary greatly, but coverage towards co-creations with citizens, more flexible valorization of heritage, and cross-sectoral integration. So these are very important things we've learned, and we're still learning within the WAVE project. So for the conclusions and as a discussion statement, I would like to say that no life without water, of course. Water is inherently part of the regional, local, and individuals' histories, livelihoods, and share local identities. Storytelling around water-linked heritage can thus be used as a catalyst and magnet for engagement of citizens in placemaking and co-creating more sustainable futures for cities and regions. So while methods for including citizens in this process are not always fully transferable across places, the potential for use of water as a vector is almost universal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kasia. Thank you very much. Also, this imagine that I see as water as a vector. Interesting, really. Now is the time of the SmartEm project, and I'd like to ask Naomi Timmer from H2O People to share a presentation. Please, we are behind of schedule, and I kindly ask you to remain within your 10 minutes time. Thank you very much, please.
Thank you, and thank you so much for this spot. I see my screen sharing is paused. Should I do it again?
Try again, because yes, we cannot see it.
Perfect. I will do it again. Be sure.
Yes. Now it's visible.
Presentation. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, and welcome to the short presentation on the SmartEm project. It's an Erasmus Plus project, a strategic partnership project within Erasmus Plus. Most of you will know Erasmus Plus mostly by the mobility support of students, and as director of H2O People and the European Junior Water Program and the working group leader on human capital, you might know me as a great advocate for learning and skills development in the water sector. And that's also where this project is about. It's a new project. It only started last March. And it is a project that results directly from the collaborations we had within Water Europe and some of the previous projects already mentioned. I will come back to that as soon as possible. SmartEm is a very nice combination of serious games for digital readiness of the water education. And it really goes into the inclusion of the educational sector and the educational training, involvement and engagement of students with water learnings and the use of serious gaming in water education. In the midst of every crisis lies a great opportunity. Last fall, we played the Sim for Nexus game within a workshop of Water Europe with the working group Nexus and the working group Human Capital. And we were, well, discussing how this maybe play a role in water education in general, what will be needed, how can we really engage people that are maybe not as familiar or don't have that inner ambition as maybe policy leaders have or very engaged stakeholders have in playing such a game. What if we're using serious gaming for water education? And during that workshop, we realized we need something extra to really engage people in a digital space, to really feel engaged and feel part of the discussion, feel part of the solution, and become co-responsible for the learning process, but also for maybe the policy of the future. So combining all these things, Erasmus Plus challenged us to come up with a project on the support of digital readiness of higher education and lifelong learning. So we're focusing in this project on real facilitation of collaboration, of engagement of students and people that are in a lifelong learning situation. So we're all in that situation, I hope. We all agree. So it's for all of us. And of course, the digital skills. Well, we all got aware of the need of the digital skills and that there's so much to learn and so much to develop, find out. And yeah, we would like to encourage people to take that chance. By taking the methodology and the results of the project, which created serious games, seriously, because there's so much work, detail, data, knowledge in those serious games. And what if we could use that better to really train and educate students in the water sector? And at the same time, create a social innovation in student learning and in the lifelong learning process of the water sector as well, and to become more inclusive in that way. So that whole process, we bounded it a bit by the water, climate, and food nexus. So that's the topic that we are discussing, and we created the Smarten project. It's a 2-year project, and it supports especially the learning process together, which we have with the partners, and of course with the students and well, the partners that are being connected to it. And hopefully it will be spread in the future to all those students that are coming to the water sector as well. NMBU from Norway is the coordinator, and as a partner from H2O People, we are responsible for the communication and dissemination, and also for creating a toolkit, which I will come back to later, because that's the first work package that has been started. So since March, about telling the results, it's still a bit hard, but I will take you to that process very shortly. So our overall goal is to build up the digital readiness, and I think, and in the education sector, which is an important sector to involve in if we talk about inclusion and governance of the future. As soon as we are in workshops together and we're talking about the aspect of the mindset of the people, of the learning, we always say we need more educational projects, processes to support and to build those bridges between the sector and the educational sector. And this project does exactly that. So more specific objectives, which we would try to reach in the upcoming 2 years, we would make it really practical because it's for the education and it's meant to be practical. We would like, and we're developing a collaborative toolkit using a couple of ICT and collaboration methodologies. Come back to that later. We are organizing and setting up gamified workshops. We're creating the curricula around the serious games. So we won't develop serious games ourselves, but we would like to take the serious games that are already being used and developed in the sector, to take that and make it available and in reach to really use it as a learning tool. And we would like to have a lot of tryouts and learning from each other in the higher education and lifelong learning programs that we as partners run, and hopefully you will join us as well and try it out yourself. So the structure of the program, of the project, we created 4 work packages. So we all are responsible for creating one part of the shell around the serious game. And MBU is creating the workshops, me for the toolkit. We have the University of Thessaly that is creating the case studies around the serious games. And the University of Niš in Serbia is creating the e-learning modules around it. So it can be used directly and practically for everyone. Of course, we also have the responsibility to take you all along because we need you as partners, as stakeholders in this project as well, because we all learn together. And as I said, we are still all learners ourselves as well. So please do join and let us know the result. So we have multiple multiplier events as training sessions together and to really learn from and with each other. So our direct target groups are the students, of course, of the universities, the young professionals in the lifelong learning programs of the European Junior Water Program and beyond, we hope, water educators, because we would like to train them to use those digital tools and collaboration methodologies. The water industry, because we all need to keep on learning and use these methodologies. And we hope to support the European water community as much as possible as well. It brings innovation, and we would like to create it at the end to hybrid methodologies. At the moment, they're focusing really on the digital methodologies. Hopefully in the future, we will have hybrid ones and really utilize the knowledge of the serious games that are already created, for example, in the Symphonexus game, which was the starting point of this project. So we want to support the augmented collaboration within the water sector, but also especially in the learning process, because we believe that we need to really start co-creating and co-learning to reach a better learning goal and to make people more aware of what is going on in this complex system that we try to get a grip of. If we talk about this structure, since we only started in March, I wanted to pay attention to the multiplier event because we do like to involve you as well, and I will announce one in a minute. And the second with the work package 2 already started on creating the toolkit. And for the toolkit, we selected 6 methodologies, tools that we are trying out and incorporating in our lessons learned, in how we can apply them to really create engagement and collaboration. They are listed here. We try them out in workshops. You can find us doing that as well to really support the learning process together also in a digital space. And we have the 3 methodologies that are really learning how to collaborate in this complex system. The intervision, it's a peer coaching methodology we're using quite often within the European Junior Water Program. It's really a way to learn from and with each other without giving each other the answers, but asking the right questions and being trained on that. Deep democracy is also a very interesting methodology to take into account the inclusion of the minority voice and the richness of the knowledge of those people that are not speaking up. And the culture mapping tool, well, those who are a member of Water Europe and received Aaron Meyer's book from Dirk at the start of the year about the essence of cultural communication within our projects and within our, well, reaching our goals. This is where we will learn more about it. And that together will be placed as a shelf around the serious games.
May I ask you to wrap up, because it's
I'm wrapping up.
Time is over. Thank you.
Yeah. So if you want to try out and start learning with us, Smarten is invited also to have a look in the June 29. There will be a workshop on collaboration in digital space, and a couple of these elements we will try out and we will hope to learn from and with you as well. And if there are more questions, and I hope you can help us out in the upcoming 2 years of making this project a success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Naomi, for this challenging projects. And now, I mean, we have the last projects of Water Project Europe, this edition of the Project Europe. That is, I mean, is an experience from a live program perspective. And I mean, also the title of the project, I mean, City River, reconnecting town to river. I mean, it's emblematic. And I can ask to be a skip from Mastercraft to take the floor and present this last project of the day.
Thank you very much for the introduction. My name is Tobias Kipp from LEW in Germany. Southern Germany. We are a hydropower operator and therefore responsible for certain parts and sections of the rivers where the hydropower plants are located. Usually the part of participation would have been represented by the city of Donauwörth, but Ms. Kickum can unfortunately not be with us today, so I will try to take over her part the best way I can. The live program is focused on the to bridge the ideas and research results and implement them in pilot projects. So that's the basic idea of that. And we are a consortium of the hydropower operator, the city, 3 universities who do some certain things of monitoring, and the Fishery Association as another partner who will represent the tasks of this target group. We are more or less still close to the beginning. The project will go until 2025, which already includes some prolongation we just negotiated, partly caused by the COVID situation we had, which brought us some difficulties. The core aspect of the project is rather a technical hydro engineering problem. The riverbed is deepening. The river Danube continues to dig deeper and deeper, which will sooner or later lead to the problem that the riverbanks will collapse. And that is a situation you don't want to have in the city area. So we have to find a solution for that. And while we thought about possible solutions, we found out that within this project and within this situation, we have the unique opportunity to do more and also improve the recreational value of the Danube and the ecological situation, and do something, and we can improve habitats for certain species, especially fishes. If you look at the lower picture, you see the river banks and they look nice and green, but you can only look at the river, but you cannot touch. And that to improve this accessibility and to better emotionally connect citizens and their river, which is really unique in this nice town, is another challenge and another task of this project. For the live project, the basic idea is not to build a barrage, which would be the classical way to solve the problem, but causes several ecological problems we don't want to have, but to build some kind of breach ramp, which doesn't have a big influence on water flows at low water levels, but at high water and floods, you have the effect to slow down the water speed that you want to achieve to avoid damages in the riverbed. And now we will combine this with other measures to build some kind of beaches for the citizens, to build some vista points and such things, but also to remove some mounted riverbanks where it is possible to create new habitats, especially for fishes. And of course, we want to take the citizens and other stakeholders with us on the way, not only to provide information, but also to integrate them in the whole process, which is, of course, some kind of philosophy of the city, but also a requirement of different EU guidelines or directives that you have to provide information and integrate citizens and stakeholders. Of course, the citizens and stakeholders have their own perspectives, which go way beyond the engineering task we have to solve. So our idea is to build up a constant communication, to develop long-term cooperations, which were not established before, to take up ideas and reduce concerns. As you can imagine, if you're talking about flood protection and changes in the river system, people who live just at the river bank are very concerned that that flood protection is still guaranteed. And of course, we want to avoid rumors. If people have half information, things will spread that are not true or may get you in trouble in the further progress of the project. What are our target groups? Of course, citizens. Fishery, we have already in the consortium, but recreation is something we didn't think too much at the beginning. There are rowing clubs. There's a very important cycling path going all the way from the Alps through the city, and should find a way along the river, which provides a very nice scenery. And of course, all the authorities involved in these processes. We have 2 work packages, or no, to be honest, 3 work packages for this. One is communication, standards like press releases or information events. We have, of course, a website, so feel free to have a look. The English version is not up to date as far as I know at the moment, but should be online again soon. We had an exhibition for citizens and some representation at certain events, but all those were stopped by COVID-19. So we will continue this in the future. But we are not only talking about information. People should be part of the process and also present their ideas about how the riverbanks should be designed in the future. And we had already had some workshops with people living directly at the riverbank or at we call it harbor, where there was this huge celebration. And this way we could, we had some on-site visits where people can receive information. It had an online survey, which was especially designed to get people in the process who are usually not directly part of such participation processes. There are some very enthusiastic, engaged people who come to these events, but there are certain parts of the population we don't reach this way. And so this is an idea to get them on board. And for the stakeholders, we have a steering committee which meets twice a year. And they do not only receive information, they really make decisions for the progress of the project. So what were the biggest challenges? I think to get those quiet people on board, not only the loud ones. And of course, the COVID-19 situation, which really stopped some of the things we plan to do. And hopefully we can do them later, because not all things could be replaced by online formats, especially if you just put your heads on a huge plan and start to paint possible solutions and ideas. This is difficult to do online, at least for people who are not too much, who are not too experienced with these tools. So my discussion statement, well, participation is really a big investment at the beginning. You have to put some efforts in getting all stakeholders and people on board, organizing those events and information material and so on. But it will pay in the future, because you will have a much better and smooth project implementation if all people involved are looking in the same direction. So there are the contact data of Ms. Kikum, who's responsible for this task. So if you have questions, you can contact me or directly her. She's the one who has the experience on site. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tobias. Thank you very much for your presentation and the inputs from the live perspective on the engagement of citizens and inclusive governance. Simos, may I ask you to go ahead with the questions?
Andreas. I would like to thank all presenters, and I will start from the last question on do you believe that European water projects can work collaboratively on citizens' engagement issue? Can you suggest some tools and process towards this integration? I think partly this has been addressed, but I would like if each of you could give a short reply and statement on these questions.
Well, we can start, from Water Projects Europe, and this is, one of the tools, for instance.
Yes, let's start with Kasia, I think, because now we're addressing, so with the first presenter, and then with Naomi and Tobias.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the question. I think it's the question is also one of the biggest challenge we are all facing. Because on one hand, those participatory or engagement processes are very much context related. And on the other hand, this, let's say, Central European approach can be difficult because of that. But also taking into account all that was stated within all the presentations today, I would say that to do it, or to get as close as possible to this collaboration, we should definitely follow those steps like information sharing, which is a very basic for the engagement process. Then, well, continuity. So that's also something that appeared several times, that it cannot just stop, but it has to continue, perhaps with some more intense and less intense periods. And it has to use trust. It has to be built on trust. So I would name these three elements: information sharing, continuity, and trust, as perhaps those that should be there as a starting point or as a basis for this general approach and bringing together all the projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Naomi?
Yeah, so what's needed for all of us to share and to learn from and with each other? First of all, this is already a great opportunity, but especially stakeholder management, facilitation, taking care of that human factor in all the projects and in our work. It takes new skills from everyone, especially to listen and to reply and to build that trust. People also study these things, and let us open up to those people as well, and to include them into the water sector, and to all become professional in it ourselves as well. So we train and keep looking to ourselves. Are we on the right path? Yes or no? Are we inclusive ourselves? To reach out to others, we need to be able that we're doing the same as well, and be critical on ourselves. Yeah.
Thank you. Tobias?
The City River project was built on existing local networks. We are quite a local project at the beginning, so this was quite an easy way to start, I think. But it would be very good to go to the next level and exchange experiences, receive best practices from other people who've done that in other regions or in other projects. So I think there's absolutely a demand for that, and I think we want to be part of it, and also to connect the stakeholders on the next levels, starting from local and regional networks, but going to the next levels should be really important, because my impression is that there's not too much exchange concerning this specific task of participation and involvement for these topics.
Thank you. There's another question for Kasia on how you take sustainability into account in your project.
Well, thank you for the question. And although it was not directly specifically mentioned, it's written in the definition of ecosystemic approach. This is a very important part in citizens' engagement, that is not only bringing people together in a decisive process ad hoc in a certain situation, but also to build bonds, sustainable bonds between the stakeholders that will also last beyond the project. The same goes with the approach to the heritage, both natural and built. With the building on respect to the built environment, to the built environment related heritage, but as well to protect and to sustain those natural features and protect them on the other hand as well. So sustainability is very much present in WAVE project at different levels and from different perspectives, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question from Naomi on the whether you include QR and AR in the series game.
Well, thank you for that question. I'm not a serious games expert myself. So we're using serious games that are already on the market. So we're not trying to develop anything new ourselves, but really to take that what is already there and to take it to the educational field. So what's there is there, and we're working with it. And I would encourage the game makers to do whatever what is technically possible as well. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think we'll conclude with a last question with Tobias on. There is a question on how many fish are affected and other animals also considered in your investigation.
I can give you a number of fishes now. We are focusing on some target species, for example, the Danube salmon, which is on the red list, as far as I know, and should have better habitats. Other animals are considered, yes, absolutely. The barriers that exist at the moment for people are also barriers for animals. So I think also birds, amphibians, and so on will have better access to the river, and we plan also to have shallow water zones, which not really are alluvial forests or linked to an alluvial forest, but something like that, which is possible in that area. So we will have a better connection. What will be a challenge is to balance recreation and ecological improvement, because if too many people come there, our ecological improvements will be quite low. So we will have to find a solution for that.
Thank you. Andrea, I think we can conclude the Q&A questions.
I think that we can jump to the conclusions of the.
Can I make a question? Sorry. Federico here. Yeah, I just because as you know, but probably I don't know if all the audience knows. In the LIFE program, we deal a lot with implementation. You see the example also from Tobias. And one of the burning issues now is the water use, of course. And one of the things that projects are starting to deal with is the issue of recycled water pricing. So I would like to ask, is anybody working on this issue? Have you already managed to work or to produce some methodology for working price for recycled water pricing? And also one interesting issue would be to have different prices for different water quality levels. That means different water uses. So this is, let's say, a question if we are already working on it, or either an input for the attendees, for the applicants, because this is quite an issue that I find very interesting for us, for the LIFE project, for the application in real life and real scale. So if you have any inputs about that, it would be welcome. Thank you.
Andrea, I can reply if I don't know if because it's very relevant to what we are doing. Water pricing of reclaimed water is something that is puzzles us a lot. I also put it in the chat for the panelists because it feeds into our business models. So if you put something very high, you get, when you're selling this water as a service, you can get a better payback time. However, it is something that it's very locally based, because you have different water pricing in Greece than you have in Denmark. In Greece, for example, the fresh water for domestic use is only one, depends on how much you consume, but it's around €1 per cubic meter. And agricultural water is a few cents per cubic meter. So it is very difficult to compete, and it's very, very country-based. In our case, we are trying to see whether we could, because it's not only water, it's water with nutrients in one of the cases. And so we're trying to see if we can have a higher marginal value than agricultural water, because we're talking also about areas that don't have any water. So the choice is no water or this water. So then you have a better possibility to have a higher selling price than agricultural water. If we go based on the agricultural water, then of course we are selling at a price that is lower than the expenses of the running of the system. But it's something that is a work in progress for us.
I mean, it's good in this sentence, and this water or no water, so that there's, I mean, you have no choice there.
It's a very good point to go for.
Yeah. I think that we should wrap up now. So, I mean, Simos, Alexander, can you wrap up and go to the conclusion of this project?
I think I will give the floor to Alexander, spoken a lot. If you have had some concluding remarks, since we're already late in our agenda.
Yes, thank you all. I mean, I've been listening to all the presentations with a lot of interest. As you know, as project advisor, we value this very much, actually, this contact with the projects. We like dealing with the amendments and the contracts, but we really like these tangible examples that you are giving today. So first of all, for concluding, I'd like to say that thank you on behalf of us in the agencies. Thank you to Water Europe. Thank you to you, Simos, for organizing this event, and all the project partners. It was interesting as well for us to see projects funded by Interact live, and what was the other one? Erasmus, indeed. And it was very constructive, so especially focused on a very interesting theme. So I believe it was fruitful thoughts on this inclusive governance, and that it will and that it should continue in the future. It was the case in Horizon 2020, but it will be even more the case in Horizon Europe, because there will be a special emphasis on multi-stakeholder approaches. So in Horizon 2020, we had the term interdisciplinary approaches. Now it's almost the same. It's like multi-stakeholder approaches. So this is the new term. And in Horizon Europe, there are add-on, actually, linked to the citizens' involvement. Citizens' involvement will be strengthened through the missions in Horizon Europe. So it's a new feature. So there will be more citizens' involvement through the missions. But there will be also new approaches to partnerships that are introduced. The openness will be reinforced, so the open innovation will be reinforced. And association possibilities also for international cooperation will be extended. So in Horizon Europe, we'll seek to strengthen the uptake of research and innovation in society as an impact pathway. So there are three main impacts in Horizon Europe, and societal impact is one of them. And strengthening the uptake of research and innovation in society is one of the impact pathways for the three main impacts identified in Horizon Europe. So there's societal impacts, there's scientific impact, and there's economic impact, which has a strong aspect on economic recovery. And I'd like to say, being myself from the water sector, that inclusive governance is not new in the water sector. You're all familiar with the integrated water resource management approach, which has a strong emphasis on governance. But whatever the name chosen is, co-creation, stakeholder engagement, water anyway is inextricably linked to human civilization. So its place in societal life will always be essential. I mean, we can be sure of that. However, now with climate change and with the reaching of our planetary boundaries, issues related to water will become even more pressing in policy and in societal debates. And more, these policy and societal debates are linked. Europe is doing tremendous efforts to get closer to the citizens, and I think it's succeeding in many ways to do so. So more than ever, governance in the water sector must be truly inclusive, and I would say as well extroverted to other sectors. And being inclusive is already required in some water legislation, for example, the Water Framework Directive, participatory approaches that require active involvement in decision-making from all stakeholders. This is mentioned in the Water Framework Directive. I took very well the note that it could be in some other regulation, for example, in water reuse regulations. So just I heard you on that. I'm not doing the regulations, but yet it's a good feedback. And the challenge related, but also the strength of the water sector is that it links to many other economic sectors, for example, agriculture, tourism, industry, and we need all these actors on board. And there are different agendas. So like the integration of in urban and regional governance, for instance, in particular, for example, through living labs involving citizens and the design of nature-based solutions. So this is presently ongoing, and hopefully some future project will address this. Just to mention one project, there's UNALab, which is addressing these living labs and nature-based solutions in involving citizens. There's the European Network of Living Labs, also helping for that. And there's the Circular Cities and Regional Initiative, which is another forum for water integration. So if you want to go out there, get out of the bubble and address some other forums, these are good for us. I'd like just a small parenthesis on the bubble. I still think it's nice to be speaking between water stakeholders, and I think each of us will make an effort to address other forums and speak in other contexts actually, and defend the water issue in this context. There's also water in the context of circular economy, of course. So many of your projects are issued from that, and they are multi-stakeholder by nature and involving, for instance, nutrients, food, textile, biomass feedstock value chains. There's the digital dimension, which is also key. And at this occasion, I'd like to promote the ICT for Water Cluster white paper, which is entitled The Need for Digital Water in a Green Europe, publication office of the EU. So in this paper, you may check in particular the chapter 2. And in this chapter 2, there is the capacity of the digitalization of the water sector to contribute to engage water consumers and influence behavior. So that would be particularly relevant for you dealing with serious gaming in particular. So I heard that, and I think this enters perfectly in the context of this opportunity, of the digital opportunity to engage stakeholders and influence behaviors. So it is important for the project to support and promote this water integration within our bubble, but also outside, and come up with innovative and effective ways to succeed in making our societies water smart. And to start with, we expect the output of this meeting, for example, the report, maybe, to be communicated to a wider audience, including, but not limited to, policy and the forums that I mentioned above. Before. As an executive agency of the European Commission, we are fully engaged to supporting you in this process and contributing to create links between the EU-funded project, policymakers, and relevant stakeholders to promote dialogues and exchanges between science, technology, and policy actors. And we will continue to do so in the context of the future Horizon Europe program more and more. And to conclude, we more than ever count on you for the water sector to keep on being represented and to continue to play its full part in the EU water and environment agenda, but also in key current EU policies, the circular economy, the bioeconomy, the zero pollution, blue economy, the digital agenda, just to name a few. Horizon Europe is coming with a wave of different topics, and you have your place in each of these topics. Even if water is not mentioned explicitly in the title, water is pretty much there. So there's a lot of work for all of us, and I'm really happy that you are there and that you are promoting this. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you very much, Alexander. It was good, I mean, to mention also the matter that water might not be visible, I mean, in just in the text of the call, but water is there, and this is important. And I would like also, I mean, to take, I mean, the opportunity to mention that also Water Europe is well engaged into the living labs development with the water-oriented living labs. We're also part of other projects where living labs represent, I mean, really, I mean, the core instrument, the core tool for not only, I mean, having, I mean, the citizen engagement, but to make sustainable, I mean, all the pathway from research, I mean, to market, and passing through, I mean, a real testing on the innovation and the capacity of the efforts, I mean, of research and innovation really to make change, I mean, in our society. You know, this is also something else that we should take into account, I mean, because we are in front of a big change, I mean, in our society, and the stakeholders, the citizens are also request, I mean, to be part of this change. It's not only, I mean, let's say a top-down approach, which, I mean, we impose change, but I mean, changes goes across, I mean, all our society, and we really need to support the civil society, I mean, to be part of this important change.
Andrea,
that we had a great discussion today, please.
There was a question earlier whether we will share the presentations. I think it's
yes. I mean, the presentation will be available, I mean, for all the participants to Water Innovation Europe, so including Water Projects Europe, and at the end of this long week dedicated to water. And well, I think that we can close this Water Projects Europe. I like really to thank all the participants, all the speakers, the projects, the panelists, the officer from the agencies of the European Commission, and whoever may really contribute, I mean, to make this event successful and possible today. So thank you very much once again. See you soon in the next opportunities for clustering projects and build together the sustainability pathway for our societies to research, innovation, and for this desired water smart society. Thank you once again to all, and see you soon, I mean, the next events of Water Innovation Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.